Good evening. This is Deepak Biscuitwala, today's host for this webinar. We have today webinar on Secrets of Building Influence by Anna Tsui. And before I introduce our presenter, I would like to talk about a little bit logistic. So during the webinar, if you have any question, please type your question on the right side panel on the question section, and we will address all your questions during the Q&A at the end of the webinar. Also, to earn continuing education credit, you have to be on the webinar at least for 40 to 45 minutes. We would like you to attend the full time, but at least we will give credit for this 45 minutes. So that's today's logistic. Let me introduce today's speaker and presenter, Anna Tsui. Anna Tsui is an executive coach who takes clients on an unforgettable journey to rediscover their personal power and authentic leadership. Her private practice provides highly focused life, business, and executive coaching to help people and teams attain a higher level of leadership and success. Anna is an international serial entrepreneur, writer, and speaker, and has been featured in the Boston Globe, Bostino, Crunchbase, Pre-Angel, Huffington Post, TechNode, Channel 7, and more. Anna is also the president of Boston Businesswoman and the Asian Entrepreneurship Foundation, and serves on the board of the Fisher College. Please welcome Anna Tsui. Anna?
Yes. Hello. Thank you, Deepak, for that introduction. And I just want to take a moment to thank the team for putting all this together so selflessly and so precisely. So without you, this wouldn't have been possible. And I want to thank everyone here for joining us. And so we're going to have a good time tonight. I hope everyone can see the screen here. And let me just, and so this is a welcome to you. I know that everyone has busy schedules, and the talk that I'm doing today, The Secrets of Building Influence, it's actually an adaptation from the talk that I gave at the ASQ conference in Boston earlier this year. So for those of you who might have gone to the conference and saw this talk, you will get something different from it. And for those who are joining us for the first time, I'm glad that we align on this topic because it's one of the most important topics in any professional leadership, professional development work that I do. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I help people become who they need to be to achieve the life that they want. And so whenever I work with anyone for any goal, whether it be that someone is restarting a company, or they want to work in a different industry, or they want to be seen more as a leader in the industry, or want to be promoted, or want to have more work-life balance, it's not just doing a checklist of, okay, so I need to do this, this, and this, right? It's more about changing holistically how we see and show up in the world. And when we change from that core perspective, we just naturally know what to do because our priorities are different, our vision is different, how we show up is different. And because of that, everything changes around us. And so I will be sharing some tools around that today, really cultivating that leader that you want to be. And kind of what, my mission is to activate hidden leaders. And so I work with a lot of technical founders, a lot of technical professionals, a lot of people from diverse experiences, because what happens is we come from a specific language, a specific way of communicating, right? And if we're introverts, there's a specific language there. If we have different cultural influences, there's different languages there. And what happens is when we go into a company or when we go into any type of meeting or offsite session with a client, right, there is a different culture and a different way of communicating there. And I help people see and activate how their personal strengths can be communicated in a way that can be accepted and really listened to by your intended audience. And so this is just some workshops that I do. And the bottom half is when my work with Boston Businesswoman and Arianna Huffington on the left. We had her as a keynote last year. And this year, this is Marty Walsh, who's the mayor of Boston. We also did something around an innovation conference, and also being bold and what that means to be bold in your life. And so I just wanted to share that with you. And now I want to talk about, why are you here, right? So besides the education credits, what is it that drew you specifically to this topic? And so I want you to take just a few seconds to just set your intention, right? So if you got one piece of insight from this webinar today, what is the issue? What is the pain point? What is the goal that you want to get a bit of insight on from this presentation? And to have that top of mind, you'll actually be able to more easily focus on the pieces that I share, so that you make sure that you walk away with something, even if it's one bit of information that when applied will make a big difference for you. So my goal in this presentation is actually to have you learn things that allow you to shift into that executive space, into that person, that leader, or whoever it may be, right, that you want to embody, so that you can have more successful experiences and in your work life and beyond. And so that's why we're really talking about influence. At the end of the day, no matter what your title is, it doesn't matter. Influence just basically helps us get stuff done, right? And whether you like it or not, you have an influence already in your company, in your family, right? And that could be a great influence. It could even be maybe sometimes a negative influence or a stressful influence. Maybe it's no influence at all, right? And so influence, if we can really own that and harness that, that's something that allows us to be, it really allows us to scale our efforts, because our influence, and you might experience this already at your job, at your company, in your life, there may be individuals that have, let's say, a positive influence, a strong influence. And so their word, whatever they say, it could only be 3 words, but it carries a lot of weight with it, which means it carries a lot of economy with it, meaning that those 3 words can move a lot of people to do a lot of things, right? Whereas if someone doesn't have that influence, or maybe they have either a neutral influence or maybe even a not so positive influence, they might actually have to work 2 or 3 times as hard, right, delivering a message or getting stuff done. So influence, at the end of the day, whether or not we like this word, it's something that's already inherent with all of us, right? So I'm here to say that having a positive influence is just as easy as having a negative influence. Oftentimes, it actually takes more energy to have a continuous negative influence than it does having a positive one, right? And so we're going to aim to have a neutral and definitely more positive influence in our lives, in how we show up with our people and our teams and our families. And again, at the end of the day, positive influence just helps us get stuff done. And so some of you might be here because this is you, right? It might feel like you're not having the influence that you would like to have. It may feel as if you might have some great ideas, or you have some really important information to share, but for some reason it's not getting across to the people, the teams that it needs to come across to. And so this can be a very the lack of proper influence makes it feel like you're speaking to a wall, right? When really it should be more like this. It should be this constant exchange and sharing and implementing of ideas. There should be a teamwork element that needs to be present, right? Ideally, in healthy relationships, there is that teamwork presence. And so with proper influence, with proper placement of energy and influence, we have a team around us and they're activated. And even people who aren't directly part of our team, they are also aligning with this process, with the goal. And so influence is really about your brand and your presence. And this is something that isn't really directly spoken about, your brand, right? And part of your brand is your presence, and your presence is really also your influence. And what's important about understanding this is and we'll talk about this later on, your brand is a big part of how people perceive your influence. And today we'll go over really key tools for you to really fine-tune your brand, because again, like it or not, you have a brand. And so something I'd like to touch upon is this myth. It's this myth that when I work with a lot of really bright, really hardworking professionals, there is this myth that if I work hard enough, right, or if I'm smart enough, or if I study enough and I get enough certifications, then I will be naturally promoted, then I will be naturally recognized. Some companies do a way better job of this than others, right? So there are companies where there is in the system just this natural positive enforcement and noticing and celebrating people for their contributions and for their wins. When I work with people, and granted this is when people come to me for help, right? What I experience, and in my professional life, what I've experienced is sometimes the people who work the hardest are actually the ones that are just given more work. So it's not enough to be really good at what you do. It's not enough to be the smartest person in the room. Oftentimes, the smartest person, right, or the person who's working the hardest, is the person who tends to work in a silo. And when you are find yourself at any point really in kind of your own world, that's not ideal, because that just means that you're not having necessarily the influence that you need, and you're not reaching out to and collaborating with the people that need to have this data, right? So just know that working really hard and being really smart and having the answer, and even if it's like the perfect answer, the right answer, right, that's only half the battle. The other part is this collaborative piece. It is the how do you extend from this isolated, siloed world, which, you know, oftentimes we do need that space to think and to work out problems. And then oftentimes what I think a lot of technical professionals, quality professionals get stuck on is, how do I go from here to here? And I'm here to tell you that the answer is influence. The answer is your brand. And so your brand is really something that precedes you. It's the piece that people perceive about you. And again, like it or not, you have a brand. There is an experience of you that people talk about when you're not around, right? There's expectations that people have of you that your brand dictates, right? So your brand is basically how you think and how you act and how you show up in the world that dictates how people perceive you. And so your brand, just, you know, even just in you looking around and seeing how people respond to you, seeing how people, if you are invited to certain things that maybe you want to be invited to, or maybe you do not want to be invited to, just noticing the world around you and how the world responds to you, your people respond to you, that's your brand, right? So for example, there are certain people who will, you know, if they're running meetings, they will not tolerate people being late at meetings and will not tolerate people being unprepared for meetings, right? And this is their brand, this is their priority, this is one of their big driving points, right? And so people around them know that, and they know what to expect when they come to this meeting, right? And there are other people who maybe it's unspoken, they're just difficult to work with. So they might be someone that people kind of put up with because they, you know, maybe they're brilliant, or they have the best intentions, or they're a key member of the team. But maybe it's just really difficult having a conversation with this person. Like it or not, this is part of their brand, right? And we are conscious of certain parts of our brand, and other parts of our brand we're not conscious of. And so it's really, really helpful to understand from other people how we are perceived, because that, at the end of the day, influences a lot of communication and drives a lot of decision making. And so this is something, the next slide, I know it's going to drive a lot of us bonkers because it's not necessarily logical. A big part of our brand is what our brand elicits, which is emotion. So what type of emotion are you eliciting, right? More often than not. And so this is kind of the wheel of emotions, and I go through basically this entire wheel within a given 3 hours of the day, right? And so do a lot people. And a lot of studies have been found conclusively, without a doubt, that we are emotional decision makers, even if we are very logical people, right? There's a reason the stock market exists. There's a reason why behavioral economics exists. There's a reason why people are smokers, right? There's a reason why people gamble. There's a reason why, medical professionals drink, right? It's just, it's the emotion behind it. It's not necessarily logical decision making. There's a reason why I will drop everything that I'm doing to help someone in my family, someone who is close to me, someone whom I have emotional connection to, even though logically it doesn't make sense, it throws off my day. It might not even be good for the other person, right? But I have an emotional response. And people work on emotion. Decisions are based on emotion. And your brand is also based off of emotion. So it's really important to be really honest and say, in a given day, and take a sum of the reactions that people react in terms of your emails or lack of reaction. That's also something to look at, right? What emotions are you eliciting, right? So, if we are coming from a certain isolated, insulated place, let's say we feel on the top half of the square, of the circle, right? If we're feeling inadequate, or if we're feeling scared, or we're feeling critical, right? We tend to also elicit those emotions from people because we're coming from this negative space on the top half of the circle. And the times when we're coming from the bottom half of the circle, when we feel empowered, when we feel thoughtful, when we feel relaxed, right, when we feel responsive, we're coming from the space and we tend to elicit this. And our brand is really built when we come, a positive brand is built, you guessed it, when we come more from this bottom half, from these positive emotions. And so that naturally influences our relationships to form this positive brand, this positive influence over people. And what happens is, most of the time, I would say for 95% of the people on this call, and for people walking this professional environment, we are in reactive mode. We are in the top half, right? We're in, I need to put out fires, I need to answer these emails, I'm stressed, I have all these things are weighing on me. We tend to be coming from this top half of the space. And when we can come from this bottom half of the space and just take a breath and break that reaction cycle, we actually naturally, if you do nothing else, right, none of the other tools offered at this call, if you do nothing else than just check yourself and come more from this bottom half of the circle, you will naturally be building a positive brand. And I guarantee you, when you are encountering this situation where you feel like you're talking to a wall, it's because you tend to have more, on the average, coming from that top half of the circle, that more negative space. And so I really want everyone here to take a moment to really think about, what do I inspire in others? What do I elicit in others? What do others say about me? And yes, they'll definitely say very positive things about you. Notice that, and maybe even notice what is unsaid, right? What are other people's body language, right? And so if it's something, and this is just obviously like a really exaggerated comical display of someone just like, please, like, get me out of their presence, right? Are people running in the other direction? Chances are they're not actually running in the other direction, but this was a really good point to note, like areas where like if every single one of us, if we're really conscious and we're really honest, we know the areas where we're not eliciting the response that we want, right? And sometimes it might be this, we might be actually invisible. Are we invisible in meetings? Are we invisible in meetings where we really need to have a voice, right? Because for some reason, we haven't given ourselves that permission of being an authority. We haven't given ourselves that permission of speaking up. I've talked to so many professionals, so many quality professionals, where they feel like that meeting, it just wasn't, they weren't qualified to speak. But how many meetings have we been in where people who are unqualified, they take the most time, right? So please just notice, if you're in a meeting, you're qualified to speak, right? And I don't care if you're just a note taker or what have you. If you're in a meeting, you're qualified to speak in a meeting. And if you want your goal of whatever that goal was that you set off this call with, if you want to be seen as a leader, this cannot be you. you can't have an ambiguous brand. You can't have ambiguous influence. You can't be like, oh yeah, so-and-so, he or she is a really nice person with the best intentions. That's not what you want. You don't want to be invisible. You want to have something, right, that's part of your brand. You want to have something that's in that leadership piece of your brand. So someone who's really good at speaking to people, someone who's really collaborative, someone who's really good at taking that isolating genius idea and bringing it into a team and getting people to buy in, right? So really thinking about those core qualities that you want to begin to build in your brand, because the good news is your brand, your influence, it's consciously built. So anyone who's on this call right now, we're taking your brand from unconscious, the default brand that you're walking around with that gives you the results that you have, to this more consciously built brand that gets you the results that you want. And so I love this photo because clearly, this woman right here, who's also a technical professional, has a brand, right? There's a really clear exuberance in her brand. There's definitely a lot of positivity that comes from a brand. And there is this openness, right? And so is your brand as apparent as this, that you can just, celebrate, right? In a meeting, at the end of a meeting? Do people know you for something? And a good question for you to ask is, who do you tend to surround yourself with, or who tends to just be around you? Because the people and their influence, right? Are you surrounded by influencers? Are they people who have the influence that you want? So I work with a lot of people who are migrating from their full-time jobs to building companies, and a lot of them are technical companies, or I've worked with people who are founders of technical companies. And these people, when they are very successful, one of the key factors is they are surrounded by people who know their influence. They are surrounded by people who already have people connected in their networks that are great referrals and introductions to them. And the people that are aware in your sphere of influence, when you want to go for a promotion, are you surrounded by people who have that influence, A, and who, B, experience your brand in a positive way? So really, really know, like, it's true what they say, you're the average of the 7 people you spend the most time with. You're actually the average weight, the average intelligence, average income of the people you spend the most time with. Think about that in terms of your job, right? So at work, are you surrounding yourself strategically with the people who can help you get to where you need to be? And if you're not, how can you make a path towards there? And how can you just identify, just, from this call, one individual that will help you get there? And also, it's important to note, if you tend to have people around you who are more on the top part of the circle, so people who tend to be maybe a little bit more negative, or maybe who hurt you in terms of building your brand or your influence, or are more weighing you down than they are helping you, and these are people that you most absolutely need to work with, then it's a really important conversation that you need to have with them, where you set boundaries of, okay, listen, this is our relationship, and set agreements to, okay, this is what I expect you to do. And, is this something that you can agree on doing, certain tasks, and don't expect anything else beyond that, right? So with people who are, you need to work with, who are more of a weight on you, can you have agreements with them that either have them not impact you at all, or that can maybe help shift that relationship into a positive relationship? So like it or not, that's your job, right? Maybe your job is to just like work on this widget, but as any type of leader, your job really is to work with the people around you. And if these people are people that are in your circle, your job is not to only get your technical work done, but it's also to work with these people around you so that they can have a positive influence on you and your brand, right? And obviously on the project that you're working on and on your clients. And any questions you have, please write this in the questions box. And also think about your company as a brand, and also your department as a brand, because these are things that also influence your brand. So what I heard a lot in the conference is, okay, I'm a quality professional, and like my brand is already this, right? There's already this preconceived notion of quality professionals, whether it's good or whether it's bad. There are companies that are definitely very enlightened and know the impact and the importance of quality workers, right? and quality work, and companies who are just like, okay, we just need to have someone here so that we can, go through compliance, whatever, right? You need to know that going in. And, a really good way to mitigate that, maybe sometimes it's not a positive influence, right, of your brand or of your company or of your department. A really great technique to mitigate that is just to say the truth. Like, listen, guys, I know that you don't really want to have me in the room, or guys, I know that you really put a lot of emphasis on quality, and here is what I have to offer. Here's the knowledge that I want to share, and how can we build a bridge with us, me and you, to get to our goal, right? So a lot of times I notice professionals don't have that conversation, and it's really important to absolutely have that conversation. So knowing where your brand stands in terms of your company brand and also your department brand, right? And this is important to know. And honestly, with my with people I work with that come from a different culture or come or global, right? It's really important to know where your global brand is too, and where your cultural brand is too, because that's something that it's a stereotype, but people people make assumptions based on, if you do speak English as a second language, sometimes people make assumptions based on that, right? And sometimes it's a positive assumption, like, okay, this person knows what they're doing, and sometimes it's a negative assumption, can this person really communicate, right? And to be really honest with that, right? The best conversations, the best leaders I've seen are people who have really, really, really thick accents, and they just own it. Listen, I know I have an accent, but trust you me, you're gonna want to hear what I have to say, right? And it's not that you need to say that directly, but when you find that you don't have the influence that you need, maybe because of a preconceived communication issue, let's say, or for women, unfortunately, it's still a very true thing, right? It is, I found it helpful to have the honest conversation. It just needs to be 2 lines, right? Where you state that, I understand that I'm coming from this situation, I'm coming from this company that has this reputation, I'm coming from this culture that has this reputation, I'm a woman in quality, and there's not a lot of women in quality, and I'm here to let you know that I have a lot to add to the table, and it would be very beneficial for you to listen to me, right? And so that moves you from, invisibility or wherever you are to, okay, this person is seeking some sort of brand and expecting some sort of listening, right? So depending on your style, you don't need to say that, but just be aware, right? Don't ignore your brand. And a really easy way to put this is your branding isolating or is it collaborative? In your dialogue, is it a isolating dialogue where you're just like, oh my gosh, these people don't understand me, they'll never get it, they just, they're not going to be able to implement this. They need to implement my solutions in this way. Is it more about you? Is it isolating? Is it more kind of problem focused versus collaborative? How can we work on a solution? How can we take, one piece of what I'm offering and work together on it? So visually, are you more in your silo, in your office, on your computer, plugging away at numbers and then just show up once in a while? Or are you more having conversations and dialogues with people, right? So are you more focus on you and isolating and maybe even figuring out the problem or the solution, or are you more on the ground cultivating that collaborative environment? Because like it or not, you're going to need that collaboration, right? And so I want to talk now, without further ado, steps to building an exceptional personal brand. And I bet you guys didn't think that this would be a branding workshop, but from the issues that I found with people that I work with in quality, the issues that I found with technical executives, and also with quality workers trying to get buy-in, this is actually something that's really important, because you can have the best solution in the world, but if you don't have that buy-in, if you don't have the collaboration, which is all built on your personal brand, then it's really, you have to work so much harder. So the first step in building an exceptional personal brand, right, is to think like a brand, to think like you're basically your own company. And so you can't ignore this anymore. You have to think the way a brand thinks. And we'll talk a little bit about what are the elements of your brand, right? But just right now, know that when you walk into a room, you are doing branding. When you walk into a room, when you respond to an email, they better be, quote unquote, on brand, right? So let's just say The next step is defining your brand and your values and your strengths and your interests, right? Let's just say you define your value as someone who is has a lot of integrity, right? So this icon on the right-hand side. Integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching. If you define yourself and your brand and your company, as a person, right, as a team that has a lot of integrity, you better be spot on your brand. Every single action you take, every email that you respond to, every action that you don't take because it's not in alignment with integrity. So do you get what I'm saying here? Really identify your core brand values. You know, maybe it's having fun. I know a lot of people who are really freaking serious. These are business owners who are really serious about having fun, and they incorporate that in how they run their meetings. They incorporate that in terms of how they schedule their meetings throughout the day, right? Do they schedule time in for themselves? Do they schedule fun in, right? If one of your values is, let's say, no incidents, right? And that's part of your brand, like, I know Anna is going to drive no incidents, right? Is that part of how you show up in the world, right? And we're talking professionally, right? You can have a different brand when it comes to personally. They could be similar, but ideally you have a separate brand. This is your executive brand. This is how you show up at work, and this is how you just know how to act, really. And what I have found is when you know your brand, when you know what you're good at, and when you know what you want to be in your wheelhouse, it's easier for you, right? You don't need to take on all of these different things and try to be all these different things. You know, maybe your brand isn't being friendly, but it's being on point, right? Then you can just be like, you know what? I'm not the most friendly person. I totally get that. Don't expect me to be friendly, but expect me to really deliver and to go above and beyond for you, right? So when you know your brand, if anything, it just gives you like a sigh of relief, because you can say, okay, this is my brand. I'm going to act within my brand. This is not my brand. I don't need to worry about it, right? So just identify, I would just say pick 3, right? 3 core values, 3 strengths, 3 interests, right? And maybe they can all be the same thing, but find 3 characteristics right now that you can consciously build on top of your brand. And ideally, those are at the bottom of the more positive side of the circle. Not, my brand is someone who complains a lot. My brand is someone who brings a lot of problems versus brings collaboration to the table, right? And the next piece is this: know your internal clients. So it's really about identifying your internal clients. And so your internal clients are every single person that you see every day. They're the people that you work with. They're the admins who make stuff happen. They're your direct reports. They're your superiors. They're your other clients too, your external clients too. So right now I want to focus on your internal clients, right? So for example, your superior, right? The person you need to report to. What are her values, right? What are some of her priorities? What is her preferred method of communication? I guarantee you, once you identify and speak to these, you're going to have a much easier time getting buy-in, or getting that promotion, or getting into those meetings that you want to, or getting stuff off your plate, honestly, right? And also, your internal clients, they are people that you work with, even if you do not like working with them, even if they might be a really difficult person to work with, even if you might think they are dumb as a brick and you can't get any work done. Guess what? Doesn't matter. They are your internal client. Keyword client. You need to be able to serve them and communicate with them. Your job is to be able to communicate with them, actually. And preferred methods of communication, some examples are, is your boss, are your team members, people you work with, do they prefer email communication? Do they prefer, hey, just informally stopping in at their office, right? Do they prefer a PowerPoint? Do they prefer really detailed emails or really simple emails? Are they not even going to read emails, right? Do they prefer some quality time outside of meetings? So maybe it's having a lunch, having coffee. Do they prefer long phone conversations? Do they prefer to just keep updated, for you to keep them updated on what's going on, right? So note their preferred method of communication, and speak to that, right? And obviously, supervisors are definitely key to this, right? But also you're going to need to have your departments communicating too. So see everyone that you work with as your internal client. And in the beginning, it might seem like a little tiring, but at the end, if you practice this enough, see everyone as your client, right? You're going to see that it's going to be easier and easier because you're going to naturally be able to communicate with people more, and people are going to see that you actually care about them and that you're actually making an effort to communicate with them and care about some of their issues, right? And care about collaboration. So it's actually going to make it easier. And then the third piece is think, live, and communicate your brand. Again, when you identify those values that are important to you, when you identify values that honestly you just want to be perceived for, so maybe one of your values is, you know, Anna's someone who's a really cool person to work with, and you're going to want Anna on your team, right? So maybe that's one of your values. Totally fine. There's no judgment on what you define as a value. Once you define it, right, it should feel in alignment with who you actually are, right? And if it's a value that you're kind of like, I'm not really that cool yet, but I want to live into it, then you know what, really live in that space, really speak in a way where, okay, I'm really stressed right now, but one of my values is like being cool. So maybe I say, all right, so I'm a little stressed out right now, but I want to be cool with this, right? I need a moment to really think this through, and I'm going to be cool with it and not overreact, or maybe not react at all until I'm absolutely coming from a space where I actually feel cool with this, right? So you guys get my drift, right? It's, you know, it's almost like, you know, we have to put on a uniform sometimes. We have to wear this hat. So when you walk through that office door, when you walk through that building door, or if you're working from home, even before you log in and check your emails from the day, you put on that uniform, which is your brand. And you think, live, breathe, and communicate through that brand. Even if it's only one value right now that you want to adopt, I guarantee you it's going to make all the difference in the world. People are going to be like, whoa, she's doing something different, right? He's doing something different. What is that? It feels more clear. It feels more in alignment. And again, have your brand be something that is on the bottom half of this circle, right? Whether it be powerful, whether it be faithful, right? There's a lot of faith-based companies. There's a lot of people that I know and work with. I really respect them because I know that they are truly faithful to whatever their beliefs are and faithful to their objectives and their integrity, right? And if your brand is also being, you know, playful and maybe even sexy, you know, depends on the industry that you're in, right? Be true to that, right? And a question I want you all to write down and to keep in the top of your mind, and this is your inner coach. This is you imagining me with you, right, throughout the day. If I were coming from the bottom of the circle, that positive piece of the circle, if I were coming from my brand, what would I do right now? If I were coming from my brand, which is trustworthiness, right? If I am a trust building brand, if I want people to see me as trustworthy, how would I respond to this email right now? How would I respond to this question right now, right? And so I want you to keep this question. This is going to be literally all that you need. If you just continuously ask yourself this question, right? If I wanted to build a brand as a collaborator and I am right now the furthest thing from it, if I was coming from a place of collaboration, what would I do right now? Maybe I would call a meeting. Maybe I would reach out and talk to these 3 people that I'm avoiding like all hell, right? You'll be surprised. We do a lot of these funky things when we're not focused on this filter of acting from our brand. And then when we can act from our brand, we have naturally developed leadership. It's really easy. So this little graph I have here, right, the top right is when you're acting on brand, the bottom left is when you're acting off brand. So ideally, your thoughts and actions are coming from the positive part of the circle, right, and they are collaborative, right, not just in your silo, isolated, and coming from a place of stress. So just notice throughout the day, and just notice even throughout today, right, how many of your actions were coming from stress and anxiety and maybe you were working on your own, and maybe you were just kind of like, upset about that and frustrated, right? That's isolation. When you bring that into a collaborative space where you take your thoughts from isolation and frustration to, okay, what can I do about this? How can I delegate this? How can I have people help me with this? How can I empower others to help me with this? Bam, you're on brand, and things are going to be a lot easier for you. And so your brand is a bridge that connects you and your internal clients. Your brand is a bridge that connects you to your internal clients. How people perceive you influences how they feel about you. Remember, we are all emotional decision makers, right? So how people perceive you, how your brand is kind of like, imagine the energy field, right, that perceives you when you're not in the room. It's like, oh my gosh, do I respond to that person's email right now? I don't really want to. Or, oh, so-and-so just sent me an email. I can't wait to open it. I'm going to respond right away, right? Because so-and-so responds to my emails right away. And how people feel about you influences their decisions. It influences their decisions about you, whether or not you're getting that promotion, right, or that opportunity, or it influences their decisions of, what you're putting, the solutions that you're putting on the table, right, your suggestions. So just know that your brand is really important. And so I think a key summary of some of the items from today is really thinking about yourself as a brand now. So, even as you're walking through the world, you are a brand. And this is definitely going to help those of you who are looking to explore different areas in your career. You better look at your LinkedIn. What brand are you putting out there on your LinkedIn, right? On your professional profiles, towards people who are going to be future referrals for you, recommendations from you, right? So really think about yourself as a brand on all aspects. And then communicate as your brand would to your internal clients. Now remember this concept of internal clients, really serving them and knowing and living your brand identity. Hey, you're a brand now. Guess what? You were always a brand, but now it's something where you know it and you can't unknow it. So trust me, in the long run, it's going to make your life so much easier when you just know and live your brand identity without even thinking, right? So any business owner, any department leader, me just personally speaking from my brand, I'm at the point right now where my brand and my identity is so well known for those around me, right? And you can definitely perceive a certain brand if you don't know me, but for those who I have worked with, who have worked with me, those who are in my circle, they really know my brand. And I'm at the point now where my brand is working for me, where I'm getting opportunities. I got 3 calls before this webinar, people reaching out to me because somehow they heard through the grapevine my brand, right? Or they perceived my brand through the content that I have out there. I did get one cold call, someone who didn't know me. So you, as a professional, you as a leader, you as a potential leader of your team, owner of a project, right? Owner of a company, really live your brand. It's going to help you out so much more. And before I end this session, I know our time is wrapping up, something that I want to offer to you. I do this all the time, right? And so I'm doing this Cultivate Your Professional Presence, Your Professional Brand workshop. It's a 3-hour virtual workshop. So I know there's a lot of people calling in from all areas of the globe right now. And so it's going to be Saturday, September 30th, basically a month from today. It's a 3-hour live online workshop where we basically work through everything that we discussed. And there's going to be pre-work, so you'll be doing a survey that I'll be sending to you to really understand your brand and really strategizing your brand for success. And I don't want to talk about this too much. If this is something that is interesting to you, I do offer a discount for everyone who's on this call and ASQ members. It's not something, unfortunately, that you will get professional credit for, but it is something that will have a direct impact on you in whatever leadership goal that you want to work towards, whether it's moving into more senior roles or even building something on the side, or something where you just want to be in alignment with your brand so people can see you as this next level of leader. So if this is something that's interesting to you, I'm not going to talk too much about this. Just send me an email to anna@annasui.com by tomorrow. because this is something that I'm putting specifically for folks on this call. So please send me an email if you're interested by tomorrow with any questions that you have, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions and get you enrolled in that workshop if that feels right for you. And so let me go here to back to the group. So this is really time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please type them in.
Anna, this is Marilyn Monda. We do have a question that says, how do you manage a boss who dictates how things shall run with little, if any, feedback from their employees? This is also a situation where all employees agree on how certain processes should operate, but despite that, the boss disagrees with them.
I see. Okay. Well, then you have a great asset there, it sounds like, which is a boss who's really honest, right? And so a lot of times I've noticed when we want to change a way someone operates, right, it's nearly impossible. So your boss right now is saying, okay, this is how I operate, this is what I'll do and stand for, what I won't stand for. And where I can imagine the issue is when you're bringing a solution, and please clarify this also in the questions too, if you have like a more specific part of this question that you want answered. When your boss is really clear on who they are, that's actually great for you, because it's an opportunity for you to build that bridge to a lot of times bosses are, or people in general, are more flexible than we know if we're speaking their language. So finding the best way to communicate with them, right, allows you to get a lot more done and allow them to actually listen to you a lot more than if we're fighting with them. So most people will try and push their own communication style on someone else. And when you understand how your supervisor operates and speak to them with their language, that's really important. So right now, your brand might be someone who can communicate with anyone, right? And can find a way to get the point across. And something where if the situation comes in where, let's say you're at an odds, or you can't really work with that leadership style, that management style, or it just doesn't work for the project that you have at hand, this is a really great opportunity for you to speak with your boss and make agreements. And so you're being really honest and you're saying, hey, listen, I know this is how you run, this is how you've done things before, this is what's worked for you. For me, what I need is this, right? And basically you spend that time creating agreements between you two where you both agreed to what you both will agree on in terms of communication. And they're all, and you'll be collaborating on that. So maybe you won't have it fully your way, your boss won't have it fully his or her way, but having that conversation about agreements is super important. Otherwise, there's a lot of miscommunication that happens. So if you want clarity on that question, please feel free to reach out. But yeah, that's a really great question.
So please type in your questions for Anna while we're waiting for people to put some questions in the question box. You know, as you were speaking, I couldn't help think about something that was in the news today, and that was Ivanka Trump getting on an airplane to go to the Harvey tour that she and President Trump were going to do. And she was wearing her trademark monobolic stilettos.
Mm-hmm.
And when she came off the plane, she had changed and she was wearing jeans and sneakers. And it felt false to people, you know.
Mm-hmm. That's her brand, right? Part of it, it's this like,
yeah,
it doesn't make sense, and I don't really believe you, right?
Yeah, people really do. They really do form even a opinion of your honesty, and if you leave off of your brand.
If you want to, you could contrast that with today's brilliant piece of branding by Mattress Mac.
And what's that?
He opened 100,000 square feet of his furniture stores to refugees, to displaced people.
Right.
And he got like 10 minutes on one of the Today shows. It's all over the news.
That's great, Brooks. And just to contrast that with, I don't know if anyone has read up on, I just saw this in the news, Joel Osteen and his mega church that's in
Right.
Houston. And it took them a while for them to open up, right, their doors to refugees in their own backyard. And that's part of his brand too, right? There's this piece of Joel Osteen does this and he's an inspirational person, but really there's some other stuff going on in the background that we're not really sure of.
Mattress Mac has probably the world's most successful furniture store, and he's done this. He's done this for many years, but it was no surprise that he came through.
So
Yeah.
while we are waiting for some question coming in, I just posted a survey link on the chat section. Please take a moment while we are addressing your questions and fill out the survey. Malin, back to you.
Okay, thank you. We're still waiting for some questions, and questions that you have for Anna. Anna, what do you think is the biggest example of a person using brand, or not the biggest, but an interesting example of a person using brand to really advance their let's say executive presence with the C-suite?
Yep, beautiful question, Marilyn. And I'll use just an example that everyone can relate to. One of the clients I worked with, technical professional, right, both in software development as well as business development. And he, as a very techie person, loved solving problems. So his brand was the guy who was the person who would literally spend an entire day researching someone else's problem because he just liked learning about it, right? And the reason why that became an issue for him was he wanted more invitation into more of these leadership meetings, because he knew just from his experience solving all these problems and interfacing with a lot of clients, he knew that product development he could help with product development because he was on the ground level. And so he really had to shift his brand from being someone who was a problem solver to someone who was more of a thought leader, to someone who was more on par with leadership, making decisions, right, influencing decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that we really had to work on was like, hey, Tom, let's say, hey, Tom, you really need to check your actions and your impulses to spend all of your free time digging into, literally rolling your sleeves up and solving problems. But what we need to do is implement more thoughts, behaviors, and actions to building up this brand of someone who is an influencer, right? Someone who has leadership ability. And so that's exactly what he did. And so he actually spent more time doing other facets of what he enjoyed doing, which is more of the spreading information, doing webinars, running meetings, doing more outward-facing pieces of educating people on the software. And so that actually, in leadership, we get emails, okay, Tom is doing webinar again, Tom is hosting this meeting again, Tom is speaking at this meeting that the sales team put together that are facing some of our biggest clients, right? And so because he got more of those collaborative opportunities in the direction that he wanted more of, and he really had to fight, like I'm saying, he really had to fight his impulse to go into the smallest inquiries and just, get obsessed about them. Instead, he delegated and he empowered other people to look them up on his own, right? And then he would just get the answer from them. And that saved him tens and tens of hours of time. And guess what? That also reinforced his role as a leader. So in that sense, just having a vague idea of, oh, I want to be seen more as a leader and less of the, the problem solver person, right? And taking actions from that step, it really is absolutely changing. And he's gotten so many opportunities to speak at major industry conferences, right? That is huge for his personal brand, right? If he ever wanted to expand beyond his company. So branding is really important. And I want everyone, if you don't have a question, I know this is a lot, right? I want everyone to think about really where you want to be moving towards and be really honest with yourself. What areas are you really off brand? So if you are someone who is moving, like Tom, towards leadership, are you off brand by really getting involved and honing in on the minutia stuff? I get hired all the time by companies who are like, I have this person who's working with me and she or he is absolutely brilliant, but they freaking dig into something and then they lose everyone and then no one wants to work with them, right? So in what areas are you off brand? Super important.
Yeah, this may relate to this next question from the audience, which says, how do you define your brand internally first?
So this is, I'm guessing the question is the brand internally, meaning how people perceive you already, right?
Yeah.
So you need to have other people tell you. And so this might be difficult for some people, but some people might find that people are more than happy to share with you, right, if you ask them. And so a really great starting point would be, let's say you're in a meeting together or you're working on a project together, or let's say even someone's on an email chain with you, right? Find someone that you can trust who has a brand that you like, right? Honestly, if they just have a brand of being honest, right? Ask them, hey, how did I come across in that email response? Or in that meeting, did you even notice me? Or, how did what I say come across? And really empower them to tell you the truth. And you might want to tell them, hey, I'm really working on, my personal branding. Maybe you don't use those words. I'm really working on, noticing how people, I work with people and how people work with me. Can you just give me some honest feedback? The more painful, the better, right? And I found, especially technical professionals, like they will let you have it. And that's great. And thank them for that. And definitely remember to thank people after they share something which is difficult for them to share. Sometimes giving honest feedback, because we want to be friendly with people. We don't want to seem like evil, right? So thank them for that. So anytime you have an opportunity, ask.
Yeah, and I like the fact that in your 3-hour session you're using the 360. I think that a lot of companies too will allow you to take a 360, and it's a great way to get all of that feedback in an efficient manner as well. And you can see trends too.
Yes, and it doesn't need to be, the super formal 360 is great, but even something like just asking, 2 people, that's huge. And then you will see trends, right? The more people you ask, the more trends you see. Absolutely, Marilyn.
Are you familiar with the ASQ certification?
I don't know too much about it.
It's a way of using testing and on key quality principles. You take a test, and if you pass, it's supposed to show that you understand the principles of quality improvement. Mm-hmm. Do you think that or certifications in general are a good way of building brand?
As long as you do something with them that's collaborative. So a lot of times I encounter a lot of frustrated professionals who are like, well, I have all these certifications, right? Like, what the heck, right? And sometimes certifications will speak on their own, but what you really need to do is activate those certifications in my personal and professional experience. So having something like ASQ behind you is super valuable and is incredibly important, because it just shows you have you just have the skills, right? You have the chops. But it's really up to you to do something with them. So something like an ASQ certification, you could leverage the heck out of that. I guarantee you at least 75% of the people here are not leveraging their ASQ certifications in terms of getting opportunities for them, in terms of having that really showcase on their LinkedIn profile, right, or in a professional profile, or using these certifications and what they learn in these certifications to be more collaborative and search for opportunities to help them advance in their career. So a great question that I would have for people here is, how are you optimizing and leveraging these great certifications and these great skills that you have, and these certifications that you spend a lot of time, right, working towards?
Right, but it can't be your only asset, because I was at a conference last week where one of the VPs said to me, I don't believe in certifications. I think it's all about connections and how you interact with people. And so I think you just have to be careful. You have to have a lot of quivers in your arrow pack.
You need to be able to do what you say you're able to do. You definitely need to have the chops. And what I'm speaking to is when we have that, when someone has everything that is required of them and can do definitely the job and then some, but then they're not recognized for it, right? And so Marilyn, I think we both have the same feeling about that person who said that. It's not just all about the connections. And he probably has a personal brand of, oh, someone who has a lot of connections, and what are his certifications, right?
Very good. Well, thank you, Anna. And if you have further questions for Anna, you can reach her at annasue.com, Anna at annasue.com. And there it is on the screen. Please consider her webinar, which looks like it will be very valuable, and what a great price. Thanks so much, Anna, for offering that to our members.
Anna, this was a terrific webinar.
Thank you, Brooks. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Deepak. Thank you for all the people who stayed awake during the whole presentation. This really will change your life. Please take it for what it's worth. And I believe in all of you. Have a great, wonderful rest of your week.
So last thing I want to talk about that we will post this webinar. We do record this webinar, and it will be available within a week on Human Development and Leadership website. And you will also receive an email for the brief survey. If you have not get chance to take a survey today, you can always take later. So again, thank you very much for all your attendance. And Marilyn and Brooks, thank you for taking questions. And Anna, thank you for the webinar. So this concludes our webinar today. It's exactly 7 o'clock. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.